All right. You picked the last one, so surely I get to pick this one.
What did you have in mind?
Well, it's a book that I read when I was 18 years old and became an absolute favorite of mine.
It's gonna be weird, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Today, we're going to talk about Patrick Susskind's Perfume, the story of a murderer. Published in 1985, Perfume is a historical fiction that follows the story of Jean-Baptiste Renouille. Hold on to that for me, bud. Its historical fiction is kind of an interesting thing because it follows Jean-Baptiste Renouille, who is a completely made-up character, although there is some thought there's some historical inspiration there. But his story is completely fictional. However, the historical time period and some of the events that happen in the book are historically linked. And so it creates a really interesting separation between the fiction elements and the true to life elements that allow the audience to really sink into this period of history and feel as though it is a true representation of something that could have happened. So, what's it about? The story follows Jean-Baptiste Renouille, who is an orphan in France in the 1800s, and he is born with the greatest sense of smell in the history of mankind. However, as we find out throughout the book, he has no scent of his own. That unique scent that each person has, you hug your nana or granddad and you know it's your nana or granddad. Jean-Baptiste Renouille doesn't have that. And as such, that sense of a lack of a person, it creates a significant sense of discomfort for all of those around him. So at first, he's placed in an orphanage because his mother is executed not long after his birth, and a sequence of people take him in only to find themselves made incredibly uncomfortable by him. And eventually, even the woman who runs the orphanage is so uncomfortable with him, she sells him to a tanner. And throughout that period of time, Baptiste becomes aware of the fact that he has the greatest sense of smell in the world. He's able to differentiate between types of wood, whether and at what point in putrefaction an apple is, who is coming around the corner well before they do themselves. However, he comes across a young woman. I believe sort of the implication is that she is just hitting puberty or just about to hit puberty. And he finds her scent so painfully intoxicating that he ends up strangling her to death in an attempt to keep that beautiful scent for himself. He stays with her dead body until the scent begins to dissipate. From that point, he becomes obsessed with the idea of finding a way to recapture that scent and create it for himself. So he, through a sequence of circumstances, winds up becoming an apprentice perfume maker, and the story sort of develops from there. He attempts to create a scent for himself that will hopefully, for him, inspire love in others that he has never had for himself. Without going into spoiler territory, the plot itself follows several parts, and they sort of follow periods in Grenouille's life where he is obsessively, compulsively attempting to meet his goal. Scent is all he has. He has no love. He has no family. He has no friends. Most people are made incredibly uncomfortable just by being anywhere near him. And so this singular mission he has of finding and preserving this wondrous scent is the only thing in his life that gives him any drive. And as a character, he is somewhat unrelatable in that he is so singularly devoted to this one task because his life is completely absent anything else, that unless you yourself are a person who has that kind of ludicrous obsession in your life, you're not going to be able to relate to him, but you will pity him. His life is so loveless, and he is met by one person after another that is only seeking to draw something out of him that they can use for themselves. Not one kind person appears in his life that isn't immediately made uncomfortable by him and then immediately abandons him. He is a pathetic, kicked dog of a character, and it gets to an extent where you can find yourself not rooting for him because he is sort of a despicable character, but you're at least sympathetic. You can sit back and go, far out, this person never had a prayer in life. There's not much else to say in terms of characters. There definitely are other characters. There's a woman who runs the orphanage. There is the tanner who essentially buys him from the orphanage. There is the perfumer that takes him in. There is the redheaded girl who becomes sort of the center of his search for this scent. There is what is he? A judge? No. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, like a magistrate or a councilman, maybe, who is the father of the red-headed girl. And all of these characters sort of come and go through the plot after attempting to extract their pound of flesh from Grenouille, but very few of them really, in my opinion, had much in what I would call a super defined character beyond greedy or horrible or just awful, really. Everyone in this book is awful. But Grenouille as a character is morbidly fascinating. He's like a car crash in human form. You're going to want to watch what's going on because you want to see where this obsession, where this complete lack of a sense of self outside of what he's trying to do will take him. And that really does pull the plot forward effectively without you needing a whole gigantic cast of other people. So that is not a problem if you think it's going to be. Where this book really shines, though, moving on from character and into style, is its use of olfactory descriptions. It almost uses visuals to help create this sense of smell. And throughout reading this entire book, I felt as though I could smell everything that Grenouille was describing. And it sort of triggered the response in my brain. You know, when you smell something that's super familiar to you and it takes you back to a specific feeling or memory or time period. I, honest to goodness, when I was being described the fish market or Applewood or some other element, I felt my sense of smell and therefore my sense of memory and the feelings attached to it being triggered by that. And it was absolutely and utterly incredible in the way it describes things. And I think that it may be one of the most creative uses of the senses in a book that I've ever seen, because I've seen sound and I've seen sight and touch and feel and all of those other things. But scent is something that I don't think gets explored very often in books. And that powerful olfactory link to our memories, this book exploits that in such a powerful, powerful way. What do I think the limitations of this book are? The plot structure and the way it's put together and the singular character and the sort of asides that happen. At some point, he ends up living in a cave by himself in the middle of nowhere for a good stretch, a few chapters of the book, I think. And that might be a barrier for some people. It really depends on whether or not you are fascinated enough by the journey of this character to follow him through. If you need a whole bunch of stuff to happen, there are going to be portions of this book that are a really big problem for you. Although the parts that aren't like that, there is a lot going on and it is super interesting. It just depends on whether or not the passages that are a little bit quieter and it's much more introspective, whether or not that bothers you will probably dictate your experience and your enjoyment of this book. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Overall, I'm going to give this book 4 stars out of 5. I think those asides, while for me they didn't ruin my experience of the book, they were slow and they do sort of take that little step back. But I've loved this book since I was 18 years old. I've read it 3 or 4 times at this point. I've watched the film adaptation. I believe Netflix also did a adaptation called The Perfume, maybe in like 2022. I did look it up before I started filming. And I do think that those adaptations do a pretty good job capturing this story. But the story itself I found engaging and gripping and enthralling and novel in this olfactory experience. And it had so much to recommend it. Even if it's not your genre or your style, it is unique and interesting enough that you should be able to get something out of reading it, even if you don't think it's for you. So 4 stars out of 5. I absolutely recommend it. Check it out. And I think that's all I have to say. What about you?
Any chance you can stop using me as a book holder?
No. Okay. Time to take the book and place it upon our review shelf. It now has 2 whole books on it. Let's try to fill that out a bit more this week. Cheers.